My husband cheated me of all my wealth and sold me to a brothel where I was humiliated to death. Before I died, he smiled and told me the truth. You met a bandit on the way to the temple, and I saved you, so you fell in love with me. But do you know that the bandit was my sworn brother? I was a joke from beginning to end. After dying by hitting the wall, I was unexpectedly reborn on the day when I first met my childhood sweetheart, the little general. He wanted to escort me to the temple to pray. I refused in my previous life, but in this life, I looked at him with burning eyes. I also asked the general to bring more troops. If there are any bandits, we must capture them alive. I am the daughter of the richest man in Beijing. My parents died unexpectedly, leaving me countless wealth, allowing me to live a smooth life. But my life changed completely after I met Qin Hui. A hero saving a beautiful girl is a common romantic plot in storybooks. No one can resist being attracted by a hero. I am no exception. So after I suddenly encountered bandits and was unexpectedly rescued by Qin Hui, I quickly became attracted to him. He is brave, kind, funny, and handsome, and soon I was addicted to the gentle world he created for me. After getting married, Qin Hui gradually revealed his true nature. He began to frequent brothels and casinos and squandered my wealth. After several quarrels, he beat me and imprisoned me in the yard. I didn't know when everyone in my Gu family had been bribed by him. Qin Hui started to give me drugs, which made me feel groggy all day long, and I didn't know what time it was. Sometimes, I could even vaguely hear the lewd sounds of him having fun with a group of women in the yard. Later, Qin Hui stopped my medication and sold me to a brothel when I was gradually regaining consciousness. I grabbed his clothes and begged, "I don't want the money anymore. I'll give it all to you. Please don't leave me here." He shook my hand off and looked down at me. Isn't it a pity that Miss Gu's beauty is wasted like this? Qin Hui, you weren't like this before? Qin Hui laughed so hard after hearing this that he couldn't straighten his back. He wiped the tears from his eyes and pointed at me and cursed. You idiot! Back then, you encountered bandits on your way to the temple to pray, and I saved you, so you fell in love with me. But you know, those bandits are my sworn brothers. I stared at him blankly, and all the past events came to my mind. Idiot. I'm just an idiot. I was actually deceived by this group of vile and disgusting people. We did this drama just for you. Haha. Qin Hui's sharp laughter gradually faded away. The eunuch in the brothel reached out to grab me. I don't know where I got the strength from, but I broke free from them, hit my head against a pillar, and died with hatred in my heart. The blood blurred my vision. I saw Qin Hui walking towards me quickly, sighing regretfully. Madam Boss, you guys didn't keep an eye on this. I won't refund your money. Oh. Why did you fall asleep, miss? You will catch a cold if you fall asleep here. I was gently shaken awake. Struggling to open my eyes, I saw a face that I had only seen in dreams, my personal maid Sulan. At that time, I was drugged and imprisoned by Qin Hui, and everyone in the mansion was bribed. Only she risked her life to escape from the mansion to seek help for me. But Qin Hui caught her and beat her to death in front of me. At that time, I couldn't move at all and could only watch Sulan die in front of me. Sulan? I touched her face. I saw you again in the underworld. Sulan was stunned. Miss, what are you talking about? She hurriedly pulled me up and put the cloak on me. The carriage is ready. Today is the day to go to Ling'an Temple to pray for blessings. Miss, please don't be late. I frowned. Ling'an Temple? It was only at this point that I began to look around carefully. This is my Gu mansion. It's nice, but also a little different. It's more like the Gu mansion before I got married. Looking at Sulan's rosy and watery face, an incredible thought suddenly popped up in my mind. Could it be I was reborn? Even as I got into the carriage, I still felt my heart beating fast. God has been very kind to me. He actually gave me a chance to live again. Now that I haven't met Qin Hui yet, I still have a chance to turn everything around. The carriage swayed out of the city, but stopped at the city gate. Sulan lifted the car curtain and took a look. Miss, General Zhong is here. I was stunned for a moment, then I jumped out of the carriage. Zhong Chainan and I are childhood sweethearts and grew up together, but he has a rebellious personality and is the type of man I have never liked. He also thought I was pretentious and not generous enough, and he didn't have a good relationship with me. So, as I grew up, I subconsciously distanced myself from him. In my previous life, we met by chance at the city gate. He offered to take me to Ling'an Temple, but I flatly refused. But right now, only he can solve my predicament today. Zhong Qinan rode slowly towards me on horseback, wearing a tight suit, with handsome features, looking like a young man. When he saw me come out, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he kicked his horse's belly and came over. Gu Qingcheng, are you going to Ling'an Temple? He glanced at the guards following behind him. Don't blame me for not reminding you. There have been bandits around Ling'an Temple recently. With your limited manpower, I smiled at him and bowed respectfully. Please give me a ride, General. Zhong Chenan's sneer froze on his face, and he looked at me in shock. Gu Qingcheng, did you take the wrong medicine? I wasn't angry at all, and I continued to speak in a gentle voice. I was not thoughtful enough and I don't have enough manpower, so please help me. Zhong Chainan coughed dryly. You are quite interesting. As he turned to count the people, I called him again. Zhong Chainan. He turned his head and looked over. If possible, please bring more people. If you encounter bandits, you must capture them alive. Zhong Chainan is still very reliable in his work. I asked him to bring his men to follow behind us, keeping a distance between us so that we would not be discovered by the bandits and could still be rescued in time. Zhong Qinan didn't understand why, but he did it anyway. The Zhong family had a problem in the past, and it was my father who generously donated money to help solve the problem. The Gu family is indebted to the Zhong family, so even though Zhong Chainan doesn't like me, he'll still go along with me. The team quickly entered the mountain road. The crowds gradually dwindled, and I looked at the familiar scene outside. My heartbeat unknowingly quickened. Half an hour later, a huge rock suddenly rolled down from the hillside ahead. The horse was frightened and stopped in place with a long neigh. A dozen bandits rushed out of the woods with knives in hand and surrounded the team. Exactly the same scene as in the previous life. The fight between the bandits and the guards was fierce, but the guards were ultimately no match for these desperate criminals and were quickly subdued. A bandit came over with a grim smile and tried to lift the car curtain. Sulan screamed and threw herself on me.
Miss, stop.
A man shouted angrily. The bandit was stunned and stopped. I also froze all over. Qin Hui, how dare you do such a heinous thing in broad daylight?
Who are you?
Mind your own business. Soon the sound of swords clashing was heard outside. Sulan looked at it carefully and then said happily, Miss, a hero is here to save us. I snorted coldly and looked at the figure fighting with the bandits with cold eyes. Noticing my gaze, Qin Hui turned and smiled at me.
Don't worry, miss.
I will protect you. Really good acting. No wonder I didn't notice anything in my previous life. I took out the whistle Zhong Chainan gave me and blew it towards the back. A moment later, Zhong Chainan arrived with his men and joined the battle directly. Qin Hui was startled and hurriedly moved aside. He watched helplessly as the group of murderous-looking men rushed in and caught the bandits off guard. The bandits saw that the situation was not good and turned around to run, but it was too late. At Zhong Chinan's command, the bandits were surrounded and quickly subdued. I walked out of the carriage, looked at the bandits lying on the ground wailing, and clenched the handkerchief in my hand. General Zhong, bring them back to the yamen. Don't let any of them go. Qin Hui's expression changed instantly. Miss. Seeing me looking over, he quickly restrained his expression. They should be villagers from nearby. Life is hard, so it's not easy for them to come out and find a way to make a living. Why not let them go? It's not easy, I murmured.
Yes.
Qin Hui smiled. So, miss, it's not easy for them to come and steal my money and kill me? I looked at him coldly. What's the logic behind this? Qin Hui looked at me in shock. Yes, he should have inquired in advance. I, Miss Gu, have a soft personality and am easily influenced, making me the easiest to manipulate. So this reaction of mine was something he didn't expect. After all, he let go of his sworn brothers for the same reason in his previous life. I didn't look at him again and turned around and got in the car. I won't go to Ling'an Temple today. I have to go back first to get rid of the bad luck, otherwise I will offend the Buddha. Zhong Chunin ordered his men to escort the bandits to follow behind the carriage. The bandits obviously did not expect this situation, and some of them subconsciously looked towards Qin Hui. Qin Hui finally came to his senses and hurriedly caught up. "Miss." I sat in the car and lifted the curtain to look at him. "Me, what about me?" "You?" Qin Hui sneered. "I am the young lady's savior."
Ah.
It dawned on me that I had almost forgotten that since he was my lifesaver, I should thank him very much. "Please come back to the capital with us, sir. I will reward you handsomely." After returning to the capital, we went straight into the government office. There was a huge crowd of people, and the people around were attracted and rushed over to watch the fun. I went to court as a witness and cried my eyes out. "My lord, they stopped my carriage in the wilderness. They must have had ulterior motives. My parents have passed away, and now I am helpless. I can only hope that you can give me justice. These bandits are not ordinary bandits. They are well-trained and decisive." "It seems that—" the prefect asked urgently. "What is an elephant?" I lowered my voice and said carefully, "Like a deserter." Then I glanced to the side. General Zhong can also testify. Everyone's eyes shifted to Zhong Chainan, who was standing aside. He glanced at me, turned around and reported, "Those bandits are indeed suspicious." Finally, the prefect slammed the gavel. "Then put those bandits in jail and interrogate them strictly." As I walked out of the government office, Zhong Chainan stood beside me. He finally couldn't help asking me, "It seems like you have a grudge against these bandits?" I sneered. "They came to steal money and kill people, so naturally they have a grudge against me." Looking up at Zhong Chainan, I calmed down a little. "Today, thank you very much." He waved his hand. "Just this once." Zhong Chunin still had his duties to attend to, so he couldn't stay for long, and soon left with his men. I walked towards the Gu family's carriage and heard laughter from afar. Looking up, Qin Hui was standing beside the carriage, talking to Su Lan about something, which made her laugh. I walked over with a sullen face, and Qin Hui soon saw me and bowed to me with an apologetic look on his face. "Miss Gu." Seeing me get on the carriage, he said slowly, "I'm sorry to bother you, Miss Gu, for the time being. I will leave Beijing after I find my relatives and get the money for my trip." I smiled. "It's okay, just stay in the mansion with peace of mind." After lowering the car curtain, I turned to look at Sulan with an unpleasant expression. "From now on, don't talk to him, don't look at him, and don't smile at him." Sulan was stunned. "Miss, did you hear that?" I seldom speak to her so harshly. Sulan didn't dare to joke anymore and quickly responded, "I understand." 10 days later, news came from the government office. It was said that the bandits refused to admit that they were deserters or that they were being directed by someone else. However, a few of them admitted that they had robbed and killed several passers-by. Since he has taken a life, that is enough to convict him. Killing someone means paying with your life. This is an eternal truth. The bandits were sentenced to death by hanging and were executed at the Kaishiku execution ground 15 days later. But Qin Hui didn't seem to be in a hurry. He actually adapted well to the Gu mansion. Sulan said that he was very close to many people in the mansion. I lowered my eyes to look at the list she wrote and curled my fingers slightly. In my previous life, these people also helped Qin Hui imprison me and drug me. "Call the housekeeper." Sulan turned around and left without saying a word. When the butler came over, I handed him the list.
Sell all these people out.
I don't want to see them in Gu's house tomorrow. Disloyal servants are always a hidden danger. The housekeeper was stunned. "This miss, what mistake did they make?"
Yes.
The butler didn't ask any more questions and nodded. "I'll do it right away." He is the old butler left to me by my parents. He was forced away by Qin Hui in the previous life, but he did not betray me. I still trust him very much. Sure enough, on the 3rd day after those servants were sold out, Qin Hui finally couldn't bear it anymore. He met me by chance in the bamboo garden. At that time, he was wearing a light shirt and dancing with a sword, and bamboo leaves were falling rustlingly. It must be said that the scene was beautiful. He seemed not to see me and thrust his sword forward suddenly, and the bamboo leaf fell steadily on the tip of his sword. Miss Gu? He looked up and saw me standing at the entrance of the bamboo garden. He immediately put away his sword and stood aside in embarrassment. I am sorry. It's okay. I said, I won't bother you anymore. After saying that, I walked past him and went straight ahead. But when I passed Qin Hui, I didn't know where to step. Miss, be careful. Qin Hui quickly reached out to hold my waist. My hair stood on end, and I used all my strength to dodge to the side. I dodged Qin Hui's hand and fell heavily to the ground. Miss. Sulan was frightened, and she ran over and pushed Qin Hui away and helped me up. Miss, how are you? It's okay. I gritted my teeth, tidied up my messy clothes, and let's go. We moved so fast that Qin Hui didn't even have time to speak. He stood there and watched us leave the bamboo garden with a vicious look in his eyes. Originally, I hoped that the bandits would suffer in prison, blame each other, and preferably put all the blame on Qin Hui. For this reason, I kept Qin Hui in the mansion, just in case he ran away. But it seems I miscalculated. Those bandits seemed ridiculously loyal to Qin Hui. Were they really willing to die? But what shocked me was far more than that. 3 days before the gang was to be hanged, they were found dead in their cell. As one of the witnesses, Zhong Chenin went to the government office to question the suspect and was told that the suspect committed suicide by hitting his head against the wall. However, he had a hunch that something was wrong, so he bribed the coroner to question the suspect in detail. I quickly asked, how to say it? Zhong Chenin's face darkened. They said they died by hitting their heads against the wall, but the coroner found silver needles on their heads. The prefect was unwilling to deal with the matter. After all, they were all death row prisoners. That's right. Zhong Chenin said that the jailer said a bandit seemed to have loosened up a bit yesterday. So this was someone silencing him? Zhong Chenin pondered for a moment and suddenly turned to look at me. Gu Qingcheng, tell me the truth. Who are these bandits? I panicked for a moment. Bandits? Aren't they just ordinary bandits? Who else could it be? But looking at Zhong Chenin, I quickly realized that ordinary bandits were not worth going to so much trouble to kill. Qin Hui, the only one with a motive, stayed in my house and did not go out. Either those bandits have other enemies or there is someone behind Qin Hui. The former is fine, but if it's the latter, then his purpose of approaching me is not as simple as I thought. Thinking of this, I suddenly grabbed Zhong Chenin's hand. He was stunned for a moment. You? I looked at him seriously. Let's talk inside. After entering the girl's boudoir, Zhong Chenin still felt a little uncomfortable. He touched his neck. Or, let's change the place? I shook my head. Zhong Chenin, can you believe what I'm going to say next? He didn't say anything but looked up at me. I said word by word. Do you believe in rebirth? Zhong Chenin didn't believe it and said I was crazy. I told him everything about my past life, but he thought I was joking. Finally, Gu Qingcheng, I have something important to attend to, and I don't have time to tell you stories here. On the 5th day of May, Yenzhou was hit by a flood with hundreds of thousands of casualties. I raised my voice and said, Zhong Chenin, in 3 days, you will believe me. 3 days later, news of the Yenzhou flood reached the capital. This is the only thing I can remember accurately, and that can convince Zhong Chenin. Even if I were to live my life again, I find that I still have a superficial understanding of Qin Hui. He deceived me and harmed me. But why did he want to kill me? Why me? Why were the bandits so loyal to him? And who are the people behind him? I know nothing. I need to find an ally. Zhong Chenin's figure had disappeared in the yard. I looked away and went back to my room. In the evening, Sulan came over. Miss, he has gone to bed. Did you drink everything? Yes. Sulan said. The slave said it was a tonic for the soul, so he drank it all. I nodded, my eyes falling on the empty bowl in her hand. The black medicinal residue at the bottom of the bowl exudes a familiar smell. In my previous life, it was this medicine that turned me into a useless person. Now, it's Qin Hui's turn to try the medicine first. 3 days later, a sudden flood occurred in Yenzhou, causing heavy casualties among the people. When the news reached Beijing, everyone was shocked. After the court session, Zhong Qinan hurried to Gu's house to see me without even having time to return home. Gu Qingcheng, how do you know this? I asked him back. Zhong Qinan, do you believe me now? He looked at me, his eyes surging, and after a long while he said, "Let her. Since he trusts me, I will have a frank talk with him." I told him that Qin Hui had bad intentions, told him about my current predicament, and said that I needed his help. Zhong Qinan listened silently, and after I finished speaking, he asked me, "Since you are asking me for help, Gu Qingcheng, you have to give me a reason, whether it is coercion or inducement. Why should I help you?" I was silent. He is right. My request now is completely unnecessary for him to respond. If he doesn't help me, he will be a young general with a bright future. If he helps me, it will create more variables. And I can't give him any benefits. I clenched the handkerchief in my hand and whispered, "Right now, I have no one else to ask for help. Zhong Qinan, for the sake of our acquaintance of more than 10 years, I beg you to help me." This is a very shameless thing to say, because I have no feelings for him at all. Thinking that just saying these words was not enough, I was about to perform another great salute to him, raising my arms, and just as I was about to lower them, he suddenly reached out and held my arm. The warmth of his palm startled me. Zhong Qinan withdrew his hand. "There is no need for such a big ceremony." That. He turned his head away. "I didn't say I wouldn't help you. The Gu family has been kind to our Zhong family, so how could our Zhong family be ungrateful?" It was inconvenient for him to stay in my house for long, so he asked a few more questions and then got up and left. I escorted him out myself. "Thank you very much." He paused. "You are much more flexible than before." I don't know whether it is a compliment or a sarcasm. I don't care. The important thing is that he agreed to help me. Finally, I'm not alone anymore. Zhong Qinan sent his personal followers to protect me closely and also ordered people to follow Qin Hui carefully. After dozens of days, nothing was found. Just when I began to doubt myself, Zhong Qinan came to me. Qin Hui covered his tracks and left Gu's house, so I went to follow him in person. I quickly said, "Then please pay attention to safety. You are the most important." Zhong Qinan looked at me deeply and nodded softly. Zhong Qinan followed Qin Hui to Qiansui Pavilion, the largest and most prosperous brothel in the capital. It was already evening, and there were already quite a few people in Qiansui Pavilion. Qin Hui went straight upstairs, pushed open the last door with ease, and walked in. Zhong Qinan hesitated for a moment, then casually pushed open the door next to him, jumped out of the window, and onto the roof. He accurately found the room where Qin Hui was and gently lifted a tile. Qin Hui stood in front of a man in a black robe. "Owner." There were two people in brocade robes standing beside the man. One of them laughed. "Qin Hui, you are so shameless to come here. It has been such a long time since you have succeeded in winning over Miss Gu. The master is really disappointed in you." Qin Hui immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "Please give me 5 more days." Looking at the scene in the room, Zhong Chun felt relieved. He listened to them calmly, not daring to be distracted in the slightest. The conversation inside did not end until late at night. The man in black robe was escorted out of Qiansui Pavilion, and the others also left one after another. Zhong Qinan didn't stay any longer and left using his lightness skills. When he came back to look for me, I was still sitting there waiting for him. Seeing him coming over, I handed him the cup in my hand. "How about it?" Zhong Qinan drank the tea in one gulp, and after a while, he told me everything he saw and heard in Qiansui Pavilion. I frowned. "Do you know those men?" Zhong Chinan's face looked very ugly.
No.
Jiang Chao, the son-in-law of the Minister of War, and He Ning, the grandson-in-law of the old Taifu. The man in the black robe couldn't see his face clearly. I couldn't help but exclaim, "Jiang Chao, He Ning." No wonder I was so surprised, These two people are household names throughout the capital. He Ning was originally a down-and-out talent, but he caught the eye of the young lady from the Taifu family because of a poem he wrote. Jiang Chao was originally just a soldier in the patrol camp. He accidentally saved the daughter of the Shangshu. He was handsome and knowledgeable, and the Shangshu's daughter fell in love with him at first sight. With the promotion of the Shangshu, Jiang Chao is now the deputy commander of the patrol battalion and has a bright future. The story of Jiang Chao and the Shangshu's daughter was compiled into a storybook and widely circulated. Nowadays, most women in Beijing fantasize about being a hero and saving a beautiful girl, and this is exactly why, etc. Jiang Chao. Isn't his approach exactly the same as Qin Hui's in his previous life? I suddenly looked up at Zhong Chainan. His expression was equally solemn. If they all work for the same guy, that would be bad. Seeing that I was puzzled, he explained that with the power of the Ministry of War and the title of Grand Tutor, if Qin Hui succeeded, he would also have a huge amount of money. With these three things, what could he not accomplish? I was shocked and hesitated. Yes, with these three things, one can rebel. As soon as I said this, Zhong Chenin raised his hand and covered my mouth. Be careful with your words. His palms were warm, and he was leaning over very close to me. I felt a little uncomfortable, so I blinked at him and motioned for him to let go of my hand. Zhong Chenin was stunned for a moment, and suddenly withdrew his hand as if burned. He drank the remaining water on the table. Qin Hui may attack you during this period, so you must be extremely careful. I will investigate the identity of the man in black robe. After saying that, he got up and went out. His steps were hurried, as if he was fleeing. What Zhong Chainan said was indeed right. Qin Hui attacked me the next day. At that time, I was doing the accounts in the study as usual. The Gu family had a lot of assets, and it was quite troublesome to do the accounting. Feeling a little dizzy, I reached out and took a sip from the teacup beside me. As soon as the tea took a sip, I noticed something was strange and quickly spat it out. But I still swallowed some of it.
Salon.
I shouted outside. I called out several times, but no one answered me. My heart skipped a beat, and I pushed the door open. When I looked down, I saw Sulan sitting on the ground, leaning against the door and seemingly asleep.
Salon.
I exclaimed and squatted down to check. The next second, someone covered my mouth and nose from behind. The pungent smell was inhaled into my lungs, and after struggling for a while, I fell into a deep sleep. I didn't know how long I slept, I just felt like I was moving. I pinched my palms with all my strength and finally managed to open my eyes. Miss Gu, are you awake? Qin Hui's voice reached my ears, and I was instantly startled. Looking up, I saw that this place was extremely unfamiliar, and I had no idea where in the wilderness this was. Qin Hui walked towards me, smiling hypocritically. There have been flower thieves rampant in the capital recently. I went to your yard to look for you just now, and saw you fainted on the ground. I was afraid that you might still be in danger in a mansion, so I took you out first.
Fraud.
What he said was full of loopholes and illogical. I had no strength, and it was difficult for me to even sit up. Qin Hui squatted down and reached out to touch my face. Miss Gu's face is so red. Are you feeling uncomfortable? As he spoke, he reached out to untie my clothes. I am happy to serve you, young lady. Qin Hui. I'm trying to calm myself down. We can talk. Let the lady be happy first, and then we can talk later. He has made up his mind to make it a done deal with me today. I pinched my palms tightly to keep my mind clear. I know what you want. I looked up at him. Don't you just want my Gu family's money? Then, do you know what my Gu family relied on to make a fortune? Qin Hui paused. You mean treasure? Rumor has it that the reason why my Gu family is so rich is because our ancestor found a secret treasure, and any item there is priceless. Qin Hui had naturally heard of it as well. You let me go. I took a breath, and I told you where the treasure is. He looked at me in confusion. My lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Qin Hui became anxious and leaned over to me. What did you say? He tilted his head, revealing his neck. I curled the corners of my mouth, raised my hand to pull out the hairpin on my head, and pushed in with all my strength. Puff. Warm blood splashed all over my face. Qin Hui covered his neck and fell to the ground. He opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. I slowed down, took out a pill from the sachet at my waist, and put it in my mouth. This is a heart-saving pill. At least it can give me some strength back. I didn't look at Qin Hui again, turned around and stumbled away. It's a desolate place here, and it's getting dark. Zhong Chainan found me in a mountain stream. Gu Qingcheng. Don't sleep. He pulled me up and patted my face with his hand. Gu Qingcheng? I opened my eyes dazedly. Ah, it's you. I put my hands on his neck and buried my face in it. It's so cold. In order to control the heat in my body, I dived directly into the water. I don't know how long I have been soaking in it, but now I just feel cold all over. I'll take you back. Zhong Chinan's body was a little stiff, and his voice was obscure. Don't touch anything with your hands. He used his free hand to hold my hand. I shook my head. Not yet, Qin Hui, the body has not been dealt with yet. Zhong Chainan looked down at me in shock. Did you kill him? Well, kill him. I felt the heat in my lower abdomen again. I felt cold outside, but hot inside. I was tortured to the point of dry mouth and tongue. I started to talk nonsense. He wanted to hurt me, so I killed him. He deserved it, he deserved it. Zhong Chainan took me downstairs and comforted me. You did a good job, he deserves it. I don't know if he was walking too slowly, or the road was too long. I couldn't bear it any longer, so I turned around and bit Zhong Chinan's ear, complaining vaguely. You are too slow. I feel uncomfortable. He froze, gritted his teeth, and said, Gu Qingcheng, let go. I don't. My hands began to touch around again. The slightly hot temperature of Zhong Chinan's body made me feel comfortable. Suddenly, an almost absurd idea popped into my mind. Zhong Chainan, please help me. Zhong Chainan stumbled and almost fell. Stop talking nonsense, shut up. He seemed to be angry and spoke a little harshly. The wind was blowing under my feet, and I quickened my pace. I felt depressed and said directly, Didn't you like me before? You even wrote me a letter. This happened several years ago, when he and I were only 13 or 14 years old. He gave me a dressing case with a letter tucked into the bottom. He said he liked me and asked if I would like to marry him. But I had no thoughts about him at that time. I was obsessed with storybooks all day long and dreamed of marrying a gentle and handsome hero. Zhong Chainan is not my type. So I pretended not to have seen the letter and gradually distanced myself from him. Later he joined the army, and we became even more estranged. When I suddenly mentioned this, Zhong Chainan was startled, and even his voice changed. Do you know? I know. I watched his ears turn red. He looked embarrassed, but I couldn't help but bite his ear again. Her hand moved restlessly to his neck, circling around his Adam's apple. I feel bad, please help me. I said it again. I won't pester you afterwards, and I won't ask you to take responsibility, I promise. Zhong Chainan happened to pass by a cave and went straight in. He put me down, pressed me against the wall, and took a few breaths. Gu Qingcheng, you are not in your right mind now. I knew what I was doing. I raised my hand, grabbed his collar, tilted my head back, and kissed him. Zhong Chainan protected my head and tried to push me away. In the end, he surrendered. The last thing I heard him say was a word. He said, Gu Qingcheng, you'd better not regret it. He put his arms around my waist, his arm muscles tensed, and at that moment, the distance between him and me was closest. So close that they are indistinguishable from each other. Zhong Chainan found out the identity of the man in black robe. The fourth prince of the current dynasty, Li Mingxuan. He is also the only prince who can compete with the crown prince in the court. No one could have imagined that he would use such dirty means and take advantage of the marriage of his ministers to win over ministers and expand his power. Zhong Chainan said that Li Mingxuan was going to make a big move soon, so he urgently needed money to pave the way. So he turned his attention to my Gu family. It turns out that Qin Hui was just a pawn. He was the one who caused my family to be destroyed. Zhong Chainan received the prince's order to leave the capital to mobilize troops. I didn't see him off when he left because I had my own things to do. Everyone in the capital knows that the eldest daughter of the Gu family is getting married. The other party was the young hero Qin Hui who had once saved her heroically. I heard that Qin Hui had lived in the Gu family for a long time, and good things were indeed about to happen. I ordered people to distribute wedding candies to passers-by at the door. The more high-profile and ostentatious, the better. Back in the yard, Sulan came over and whispered, "Miss, he's awake." I nodded calmly, turned left and right in the yard, and finally walked into a room. Qin Hui was tied up with iron chains and looked extremely thin. He was lucky that my hairpin didn't kill him. Zhong Chanan helped me bring him back and imprisoned him, just like he treated me in my previous life. I pushed open the door, and a fine dust rose in the room. I fanned myself with a handkerchief. Qin Hui squinted his eyes and looked over. When he saw it was me, he immediately started struggling frantically.
Bitch.
"Let me go," I said calmly. "Why are you in such a hurry? Our wedding day is just a few days away. Isn't this what you've always wanted? You'd better tell me everything you know, otherwise I won't be willing to use such an expensive tonic to keep you alive." Qin Hui looked at me, his eyes full of despair. Wrong, it shouldn't be like this," he murmured. "Isn't it said that you are gentle and kind, naive and easy to deceive? How could this be?" After hearing his words, I was moved. Turning to look at him, "Because you are a discarded pawn, Qin Hui. They don't want you to live, so they let you approach me and gave you wrong information and intelligence. Even so, do you choose to say nothing?" In order not to alert the enemy, my wedding with Qin Hui was held as scheduled. I found a man with supernatural powers, put on Qin Hui's human skin mask, and went out with me to meet guests. The Gu mansion is crowded with guests today, including wealthy merchants and officials from the capital. Fireworks and firecrackers were set off all day long. I followed the process, worshipped heaven and earth with a substitute, and was sent to the bridal chamber. There was silence all around me. I lifted the veil on my head, and the stand-in respectfully handed me the note. "Miss Gu, someone stuffed it into my hand during the chaos just now." After that, he took the reward and left. The person who gave this note was probably the fourth prince's gang. They must have become suspicious after not seeing Qin Hui for a long time. The note stated the time and place, asking Qin Hui to arrive on time for the meeting. I threw the note into the brazier and watched the flames rise and devour it. Just as I was thinking about it, Sulan knocked on the door and came in. "Miss." She walked a little fast, Qin Huiken said. On my wedding night, I was in my cell wearing my wedding dress. The groom, who should have been full of vigor and vitality, knelt on the ground with wounds all over his body and wrote down everything he knew about the fourth prince with trembling hands. Strongholds, secret codes, weapons hiding places, everything I know is here. Qin Hui looked up at me with red eyes and said, "You said you would let me go." I took the paper and looked at it carefully. "Yes, I did. But you don't know me very well." My eyes moved to his face. "I am a person who doesn't keep my words." Qin Hui's eyes suddenly widened. "You." The next second, I pulled out the dagger from my sleeve and stabbed it into his heart. "Now go to hell. Qin Hui is dead." This time he was finally dead. I had his body buried under the apricot tree in the yard. As nourishment, this is his final value. The fourth prince will meet Qin Hui in 3 days. Right now, Qin Hui definitely can't go. I found the man who was good at disguise again. He listened to me, smiled, and pushed the gold back. "Miss Gu, I value life more than money." After much thought, I was the only one who went.
"Miss."
Sulan tried to stop me. "It's too dangerous." But I can't help it. Before Zhong Chainan comes back, I have to keep the fourth prince stable. I have to buy him some time. Their planning takes time, and I can't let it fail. I handed the paper written by Qin Hui to Sulan. "Deliver this to the dim sum shop on East Street." Zhong Chainan said that it was one of the prince's private properties and he would collect intelligence for him on a daily basis. Now this is all I can do. 3 days later, I went to the appointment on behalf of Qin Hui. Wearing my cloak and hood, I arrived at the place they had agreed upon. This is a house that has been abandoned for a long time. The gatekeeper's face changed immediately when he saw me. Before he could ask, I gave the code. The two men looked at each other and then looked at me in surprise and suspicion. "Why don't you get out of the way?" I glanced at them calmly. After a moment, they stepped aside and let me in. My hands hidden under my cloak were trembling slightly. I have lived for more than 10 years, and the things I have experienced during this period have almost used up all my courage in this life. The yard was deserted, the pond had long dried up, and occasionally a mouse would run by. But in such a yard, there is an exquisite table placed on one side. A man had his back to me, savoring the delicious food and wine in front of him. I forced myself to calm down and walked over there. When I got closer, I stopped. The man glanced at me lightly, and it was this glance that made the hairs on my body stand on end. His eyes were like a poisonous snake hiding in the dark, vicious and waiting for an opportunity to strike. The man suddenly laughed. "Don't know me?" I came back to my senses instantly, kneeling down and bowing my head. Gu Qingcheng, greet your highness." Li Mingxuan was drinking by himself. "I remember, it wasn't you I invited today." I stood up and met his gaze. "Qin Hui can't come because of something, so I'll come in his place." Li Mingxuan sneered and raised his hand slightly. I had no doubt that someone would kill me as soon as his hand fell. I shouted urgently, "Your Highness, I am more useful than Qin Hui. I can offer your Highness countless wealth and manage these shops and properties for your Highness." Li Mingxuan paused, looked down at me, and there was a hint of seriousness in his eyes.
"So, what do you want?"
"But it's just your Highness's protection." He tapped his fingers slowly on the table, as if thinking. But this clattering sound gives people an inexplicable sense of oppression. My knees were sore from kneeling on the gravel, and a layer of cold sweat gradually appeared on my forehead. I suddenly realized that what I said might not impress Li Mingxuan. So I spoke again. "Your Highness, have you heard of the Heshan treasure? It is rumored that the ancestor of my Gu family found a treasure in Heshan, and since then he has become prosperous and became the richest man in the capital. I once used this rumor to hurt Qin Hui, and now I'm going to do it again. After all, no one can resist the temptation of treasure." Li Mingxuan's expression really changed. Did the Gu family really find the treasure back then? Really? I lied with my eyes open. My ancestors hid the treasure map in a secret place. "I am willing to present the treasure to your Highness, just to ask for your protection in the future." The yard fell into silence. After a long time, Li Mingxuan moved.
"Good."
He smiled and helped me up, saying, "Miss Gu is smart and clever, and she will definitely be a rare talent in the future." He asked me some questions in detail, and I answered them one by one, not daring to slack off at all. "In this case, Miss Gu should go back first. Li Mingxuan said that if there is any need, someone will contact you." I nodded and said goodbye. When I was about to leave the yard, Li Mingxuan called me again. "You said Qin Hui is ill? What is the illness? Is it serious?" I smiled. "Common cold, some fever." Li Mingxuan understood. "Miss Gu probably doesn't know that I gave them a poison called qianji. They need to take the antidote on the 15th of every month, otherwise they will surely die. Today should be the day for him to come and get the antidote." I was shocked, and my smile froze. Li Mingxuan still looked at me with a smile. "So, as long as he is not dead, he will definitely come over just a cold." He sneered. It seemed to be laughing at my poor acting skills. Changing the subject. "Miss Gu, did you kill him?" The words got stuck in my throat, and I couldn't utter them. Because I felt it, I felt his murderous intent. Li Mingxuan wrapped himself in a black robe and was escorted towards the secret passage in the yard. By now, he had realized something was wrong. Before leaving, he instructed the gatekeeper, "Give Miss Gu a good send-off." I could feel the yard suddenly become empty. The group of people hiding in the dark seemed to have left with Li Mingxuan. But my crisis had just arrived. The gatekeeper approached me step by step with a sharp knife in hand. I retreated to the corner of the wall, tripped over a stone under my feet, and fell to the ground. This time there is really no way to avoid it. The man raised his long knife and slashed at me. I quickly raised my hands to protect my head and subconsciously called out Zhong Chenan's name. The next second, the sound of breaking wind rang in my ears. A sharp arrow pierced through the silent night and pierced into the man's back. The long knife in his hand fell to the ground, and he fell heavily beside me. I looked up in panic and saw Zhong Chainan riding a white horse and holding a bow and arrow outside the courtyard gate. Seeing that I was fine, he quickly dismounted and ran towards me. "Gu Qingcheng, I'll take you back." I stared at him blankly. It turns out that my taste has never changed, and I still like heroes so much. He carried me on his back and was about to walk out. I suddenly remembered something and pointed in the direction Li Mingxuan left. "There's a secret passage there. It's not too late to chase him now." Zhong Chainan gritted his teeth. "Someone has already gone after her. Gu Qingcheng, can you please consider yourself first? Someone is chasing. That's good. So I should be safe now, right?" Lying on Zhong Chainan's shoulder, my consciousness gradually blurred. I felt like I slept for a long time. Maybe it was because Zhong Chainan came back. The tension in my heart relaxed, and I fell asleep without any worries. It was 3 days later when I woke up again. In just 3 days, the entire capital city changed. Sulan enthusiastically told me what had happened during this period. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has already collected evidence of the fourth prince's treason. When the emperor found out, he was furious and has already imprisoned the fourth prince. Officials and ministers who were in the same party as the fourth prince were also taken under control. I heard that the daughter of the Minister of War and the Grand Tutor divorced their husbands and took the initiative to go to the Dali Temple to accept investigation. Sulan seemed to have thought of something and said hurriedly, "Oh, yes, there is also. Besides?" I was surprised. So much happened in just 3 days? What else? Sulan pursed her lips and smiled. "General Zhong comes to see you every day. Today you seem to be still asleep, so he just left."
Ah.
This one. Zhong Chainan, I suddenly want to meet him too. After sleeping for 3 days, I feel full of energy at night. Sulan accompanied me to the street and bought a lot of things. Sulan looked at the wristband in her hand and asked, "Miss, why did you buy this man's thing?" I coughed dryly. Don't ask questions that you shouldn't ask. I thought I would see Zhong Chainan the next day, but unexpectedly, I couldn't even see his shadow for several days. When he heard that the fourth prince had been convicted, all the government affairs he had been in charge of fell on the crown prince. As a close minister to the prince, Zhong Chainan was promoted 3 levels in rank. He was asked by the prince to handle some matters and had not left the palace for several days. I feel a little depressed. As soon as Sulan heard that Zhong Chainan had left the palace, she hurried over to tell me. Without saying a word, I got on the carriage and went to the Zhong family. Zhong Chainan looked like he had just returned. When he came out to see me, he looked haggard and had stubble on his chin. Seeing that it was me, he quickly covered his face. "You wait a moment, I'll go change my clothes." After saying that, he hurried inside again. He never cared about these things before. I curled the corners of my lips and ran after him. "Zhong Chainan, stop." He stopped on the porch and looked up at me. I suddenly felt a little nervous. "I came to you to thank you." He seemed anxious to go back. The Zhong and Gu families have such a close relationship. It is only natural for me to help you. You don't have to take it to heart. I was stunned. 2 family ties? From the beginning to the end, you helped me just because of the friendship between our 2 families? Zhong Chainan looked at me and scratched his hair in annoyance. I asked him directly. "I just want to ask you, do you still like me now? Or do you think that the friendship between the Zhong and Gu families can be deeper?" This question is straightforward enough. If an ordinary lady said this, she would probably be so ashamed that she died. But I was thick-skinned and still stood there, staring at Zhong Chainan. He was stunned for a long time and finally couldn't help laughing. "Gu Qingcheng, why are you like this?" Zhong Chainan was busy for more than half a month before he finally had some free time. He asked me to go to Ling'an Temple to see the peach blossoms. The trip to Ling'an Temple, which was planned a long time ago, is now back on the agenda. Sulan dressed me up and couldn't help laughing. "The lady is so beautiful." When we went out, Zhong Chainan had already arrived. He stood at the door, tall and straight, very elegant. He turned around when he heard the voice, his eyes full of smiles. Sulon whispered in my ear, "Miss, look, I told you were pretty. Even General Zhong was stunned by you." Her words were so embarrassing, or maybe Zhong Chenan's eyes were too hot. I actually felt my face getting hot. Zhong Chenan took my hand and led me into the carriage. On the way to Ling'an Temple, the scenery was no different, but my state of mind had undergone a drastic change. On this road, there are no bandits, no Qin Hui, and they will never pull me into the abyss of darkness again. I lifted the car curtain and looked at Zhong Chenan. The sunlight fell on his face, and he turned and smiled at me. Very nice. I suddenly feel a little excited about the future. We hurried back without seeing the peach blossoms at Ling'an Temple. Because I was not doing well, I suddenly fainted. Zhong Chenan was so anxious that he brought the most powerful doctor in Jian Hall directly to Gu's house. The old doctor felt my pulse, his brows relaxed and then wrinkled and relaxed again, and finally stroked his beard. This is a happy pulse. Zhong Chenan was stunned. He looked at me, and I looked at him. After a long time, he asked me, "How are you feeling?"
Good.
He nodded. "Then I'll go home first." After saying that, he turned and left. I stopped him without knowing why. "Where are you going?" He didn't even turn his head. "Go back and tell them that you and I have to get married earlier." Over.